Warning, the man you are about to listen to is a moron. He knows nothing, he is nothing, he's just a fun guy. Also, the following podcast is not for children. The content and language involved is more suited for sloths. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the very first, the inaugural, the imaginary, episode 0 of Wake and Bake with Birkner and Friends. I am your host, Eric J. Birkner, and with me today in the studio is the fantastic, the absolutely awesome, the technologically advanced Homer. Homer, can you say hi to the fellows, the people for me?
What's going on, everybody?
That is Homer. He sits in the background. He handles all the stuff that I am incredibly too dumb to handle. Today I would like to welcome you to the episode 0 of what I like to call episode 0 of a podcast that I am going to be releasing. Today's episode is basically just going to be a breakdown of what this show is going to be all about. I'm going to introduce a couple segments that we are going to be having throughout the podcast, and then I'm going to break into a first segment, and I'm going to give you guys a little story about who I am. So to start the podcast off today, let's just give you a little idea of what we are. We are a podcast. I, Eric Birkner, am a medical marijuana user, an advocate for medical marijuana, a father, a son, a brother, and also a recovered addict. This podcast I will be using to showcase the ability of medical marijuana to help people with all sorts of conditions, including addiction. But the main thing that I want this podcast to do is to shine a light on some of the amazing things that Ontario has to offer. To do that, I am going to be busting out segments where hopefully I can get some people in to talk to local musicians, local business owners, different restaurants, stuff like that. I really hope to bring Windsor and the surrounding areas really to the light for everybody around here. That being said, I'm going to start out here with a first little segment that I like to call the best part of waking up is a big dab in your cup. Ladies and gentlemen, the new segment, we're going to try and introduce this one at the beginning of the podcast every week. Sometimes, depending on guests, we do not want to force people who do not want to be around cannabis. So if we have a guest, we will record these that do not want to be around cannabis. We will record these pre. Today, we have a gorgeous, delicious looking, and really I wish this was video right now so you guys could see these dabs of White Widow concentrate from Glass Man Concentrates. I'm telling you people, these things are absolutely gorgeous. I'm going to take a little dab here and I'm going to give you guys an idea of why I use this specific concentrate for my aches and pains and hunger issues. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I've got my nail nice and warmed up here. Got a nice little dab, and away we go. Ooh. Now, what I like about the White Rhino is I've got some pretty bad knee pain due to some arthritis that I have, and easily one dab of this White Rhino immediately gives me relief from my symptoms. And it tastes very good. Ooh, excuse me. The best thing I find about concentrates is all around you're smoking less plant matter, you use less, but you have to make sure where you get your concentrates from is a valid place. Like, there is dangers with concentrates. These are made with butane, alcohol sometimes, and there are dangers to it. That's why I will only ever get my concentrates from Glassman Concentrates. They make sure that everything is of the highest quality, sheer glass, beautiful shatter. If you like a good shatter, they're the people to go to. Homer here is now going to take a little dab if you guys would like to listen in. Attaboy, Homer. You know, after that dab, you know, you get yourself, whether you're at Higher Limits or you're at home or you're in the studio like I am today, taking your medication, you know, you're nice and medicated, you're relaxed, you're feeling good, but suddenly, from the corner of the room, you hear, man, I got the munchies. Well, do we have a segment for you guys? Man, we got the munchies is a segment of the show where I'm going to point you to just some places that I like to go, get some eat, get some drink. Today, we're going to point out a long-standing local business named South Detroit, conveniently located directly beneath Higher Limits. Wink, wink. This place is great. I've been there a bunch of times. I like to take my wife. It doesn't matter what day you want to go on. You go on a Wednesday, they got 350 Canadian clubs. You go on a Tuesday, 2-for-1 Taco Tuesday. Buck a bone ribs Wednesdays. $2 a shuck oysters on Thursdays. Friday night's pub night. And then live music every Saturday night. This place is awesome. The chef's great. He'll treat you right. It's your regular pub fare, but with a little added twist of just being better. It's a blast going to this place. It's been there for a very long time. I love pointing out anything that's been local. And I honestly, I love the name South Detroit. Obviously, we're in Canada, so it's just Windsor has always been kind of the little Detroit, so it fits. If you want to have a few good drinks anytime or a few good eats after you've been up at Higher Limits or you're just going downtown, this is the place to go. Up next, guys. Why didn't I think of that? Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to start this segment off by saying that I am currently not sponsored by anyone. Any of the businesses or anything that I will be mentioning from here on out are just places that I like to go to, and I enjoy spending my time. With that said, today I'd like to give a nice shout out to Higher Limits downtown, Canada's biggest and, in my opinion, coolest medical vapor lounge around. If you're like me and you have your medical license and you do not like to smoke at home for any possible variable reasons, or you're just a recreational smoker that likes to get out and not smoke at home either, Higher Limits is the place for you to go. For a $5 cover fee, you get inside to probably one of the coolest places in downtown Windsor. Easily the chillest. The people there are fantastic. They've got a volcano bar where you can go up, sit at the bar. They bring out a medical volcano device for you that you can vape your medical cannabis in. It's fantastic. They have great staff that'll sell you any variety of different snacks or drinks that you could possibly want. Video games, TVs, sports, ping pong, pool. They've got it all. They also have weekly events, things like Bong Pong, local rap groups coming to play concerts there. It's a fantastic place to go to. Oh, and they also do some of the best and funnest, in my opinion, Super Smash Bros. Tournaments around. You like to get stoned and hang out with your friends and play Super Smash Brothers? This is the place to do it. I love it. Honestly, I've been going there for a while. Me and my wife enjoy it an awful lot. It's a great place to chill. It's a great place to relax. Nobody there is trying to start any trouble. And, you know, if you're like me and you don't really like to go downtown because the drunk crowds can get rowdy and it just can be a whole shit show, Higher Limits is the place to go. I think it's about time to introduce a new segment. Story time, ladies and gentlemen. This segment, under normal circumstances, is going to be where I have either myself or a guest or maybe even Homer come in and tell a humorous or, in the very least, very interesting, usually more happy story than I'm about to tell you. Normally, I'm going to try and keep this podcast funny and educational and happy-go-lucky. But there's been some things in the news recently that have really been weighing heavily on me, and I wanted to talk about that today. I kind of quickly inserted off the top that I am an addict. This story, that is true, and this story is going to be my story of addiction and my fighting it. In the news recently, there's been a lot of talk about fentanyl and fentanyl addiction and overdoses and all sorts of stuff that is absolutely terrible, and it's heartbreaking. What has been weighing on me has been the comments that I have seen from random strangers on the internet, so take it with a grain of salt, but the absolute hatred or vilification or anger towards addicts and like, oh, well, you know, that guy overdosed and he deserved it because he did drugs. This, to me, this hurts a lot. I am a recovered addict. I have been an addict for 16 years. 10 years ago, I made the decision to change my life for the better. And every day since then, I have fought my urge to do any number of different drugs so I can have a better life for myself. The story I'm about to tell you is all true. I'm going to omit names and change some names if I'm going to have to use names, but I am not going to be calling anybody out other than myself. This is not anybody else's story. This is my story, so I don't want anybody being dragged through the dirt because of what I'm about to say. 16 years ago, I was a 16-year-old teenage boy living in Amherstburg. At that point, I had already done, your average teenage bullshit. I had smoked marijuana. I had done mushrooms. I had, done the little bit of acid here or there. Not really too much. But at that point in time, a little drug called ecstasy showed up on the streets of Amherstburg. Ecstasy, as many of you know, is what's known as like a party drug. It's been mostly replaced recently by Molly or other drugs of the sort, usually related to like raves or big music festivals. When ecstasy hit Amherstburg, it hit me very hard. There was friends that I could connect with, that I could get basically anything I wanted, and I immediately, as soon as I heard it, I wanted to try it out. So I got some, and I did some. And that started what I like to say is my first real dip into addiction. For the next 3 years, I ate more ecstasy pills than I did food. I spent more time rolling my face off, air quotes, than I did sleeping, working, or anything else in my life. Ecstasy became almost everything to me, except I was still able to run a semi-normal life, other than like I had by this point alienated myself from family. I only hung out with people that had the same mind view as mine, which was, do drugs. Let's get high. So 3 years I did ecstasy, which all culminated in a friend's birthday party that turned into a week-long party. During this week-long party, I don't want to exaggerate, but I probably realistically did somewhere near 40 to 50 pills of ecstasy. And there was a point where me and a friend, and I'm going to call this friend Phil, me and Phil we couldn't do it anymore. It had been 6 days of just drugs and booze and no sleeping and crazy fights and just the most insane bullshit that nobody actually really wants to deal with unless they're fucking stoned. So we looked at each other and we said, fuck, Phil, let's get the fuck out of here. So we go back to Phil's house. Phil lived just on the outskirts of Amherstburg. We went to his house and we decided, you know what? It's time to try and get some sleep. We both chugged some water. We both lay down and we go to sleep. I have never, ever been able to sleep on any drug whatsoever at any point. So for me, laying beside Phil, it was basically staring at a wall. But it was okay. I was, starting to come down. For those of you who've never taken ecstasy, I'm going to tell you something here. Ecstasy is what I like to call the greatest feeling, followed immediately by the worst feeling you could possibly imagine times 3. The come down from ecstasy is horrible. And if you listen to what I said earlier, I was coming down from a whole fucking awful lot. So Phil had fallen asleep in bed, and I suddenly started getting the spins and not feeling well. So I went to the bathroom. It was at this point that I vomited blood and basically lost control of my bodily functions and fell to Phil's floor in the bathroom. I hadn't eaten in a week. I had barely drank anything other than booze for that entire week. And the only thing I ate were pills that some asshole pressed in a garage somewhere. So I fucked myself up pretty bad. I tried to call for a friend to get a ride home. I was not going to call a cop or an ambulance because, I'm on a lot of drugs. I was unable to use the phone. My hands would not work in the way that I needed it to. It was at this point that I figured, well, I'm only a 15-minute walk away from home. I feel terrible and I may vomit, but I could do it. That 15-minute walk, ladies and gentlemen, took me close to an hour and a half. I woke up on the ground 3 times over the course of that walk. I don't remember falling down. I don't really remember getting up. I just remember suddenly being on the ground and then walking again. I got home fairly okay. I fell asleep for close to 36 hours, and I woke up. When I woke up the following 36 hours later, whatever the hell it was, I do not remember. It was so long ago. I vowed from that day forward I would never touch ecstasy again. I stuck with that vow. The problem was I was already an addict. So ecstasy had scared me, but at this point I had already, dabbled in things like cocaine and, a little bit of crack here or there. So my next logical step was, okay, well, I need to get high, but I can't do ecstasy anymore. So what do I do? Next logical step, at least to my fucking brain, was to go to cocaine. So cocaine was my drug of choice for a solid year. During that year, I had once again tried crack cocaine a couple times, but really wasn't my thing. But the problem was cocaine became too expensive and hard to find. Crack was the new thing. So, of course, being the addict that I was, I moved on to crack. And then I had a friend who I've known for a long time. I'm actually not really sure what has even happened to this friend. I'm going to call this friend Bill. And Bill liked to do prescription drugs. And Bill could find a lot of prescription drugs, really cheap, really easy. So Bill had talked to me, and I was telling him how it was getting really annoying that, I couldn't find anything but crack, and whatever. I love crack, but I wanted other things. And Bill introduced me to prescription drugs. Bill sold me my first pill of Oxycontin. Now, I'm going to say I was lucky enough to avoid the whole fentanyl rage, but I know what opiates can do to a person, and I know exactly how quickly an opiate can take you down a road that's terrible. I did, for a long time, for the next 2 years basically, 2.5, I took Oxycontin, I took morphine, I took anything I could, Percocet, anything I could really get my hands on, all while smoking crack cocaine. So for 2.5 years this went on, and then there came a point. Now, I said earlier how ecstasy almost almost sucked up everything in my life, almost controlled everything, except I was still able to work and I was still able to do shit like that. Crack cocaine did not allow me to really work. Crack cocaine and prescription drugs sucked up my entire life. This culminated with me on the roof at a job roofing. And I decided I just couldn't go on any longer. I had to smoke some crack. So I go in to the customer's bathroom in their fucking garage. And I am smoking crack cocaine in a customer's bathroom. And I look up at myself in the mirror and I see myself smoking a rock of crack cocaine in a stranger's house, itching to open up their medicine cabinet so I can see if they have any good drugs. And suddenly my brain, I want to say snapped, but snapped isn't the right word because it's not like I went insane. I suddenly had clarity. I suddenly realized what exactly I had done over the last month or so, because before that I had spent everything I owned. I had sold everything I owned. I had built up a debt of almost $5,000. I had literally fallen into a hole where I had taken money from everybody I knew, stolen, borrowed, just did whatever I could to get as much drugs as I possibly could. I put the crack pipe back in my pocket. I looked at myself in the mirror, and I had an empty gaze. I walked out of the bathroom, and I walked back up onto the roof. And I worked for a couple minutes, maybe 5 minutes max, and I wept. I wept, and I wept, and I wept. And I'm going to tell you something. I was on a roof with big burly men, dudes that like you see walking down the street, like, you know, catcalling women, that sort of thing. At this point, I was terrified that I was just going to get laughed at and fucking pushed off the roof and told to quit being a pussy and a faggot and get back to work. I am pleasantly surprised to say, and really I didn't think about this. This only really come to my head when I was thinking about this segment and how I was going to tell you guys my story. I really hadn't thought about it until then, but the men on that roof did not make fun of me, did not laugh at me. They didn't even just shrug their shoulders and look away from me. Every single one of them came to me and was worried about me and was asking me what was going on. At this point, I spilled my guts. I told them everything. My boss at the time was a great man. He struggled with alcohol addiction himself. He took me directly off the roof. He gave me a paycheck for the week, and he brought me to Brentwood. I'm going to say right now, I have nothing against Brentwood. If there are plenty of people who have succeeded becoming recovered addicts through Brentwood, and I applaud Brentwood for that. I will follow that up by saying that Brentwood was not the program for me. I tried it. It was not what I enjoyed or what I could do. I'm not going to get into any specific reasons, but it was just not something that I knew that I'd be able to follow through in. So I moved away from Brentwood, and I went on to, I did some AA meetings for a little while because I was scared of going to an NA meeting because I didn't know what the people would be like in an NA meeting. I had friends that went to AA meetings, so I went to AA meetings with them and just replaced the word crack or prescription drug with alcohol. I quickly realized that wasn't going to help. There wasn't enough. I was not able to relate to these people. While alcohol addiction is very similar to drug addiction, it does have some key differences, and I was just having a really hard time relating to these people. So eventually I decided to try NA, Narcotics Anonymous. Once again, I do not hold anything against Narcotics Anonymous. I think they are a fantastic organization, and I love the fact that they help people out. I quickly realized after a few meetings that their ideals were not exactly going to work for me either. I have since gone to meetings. I haven't gone to one in a very long time, but I recently was talking to a friend who wanted to go, and I said that I would gladly go to meetings with him. I have nothing against them. I greatly, greatly, greatly respect the people they have there and what they do. But I knew that it wasn't going to work for me. I knew immediately upon getting there. I kept with it for a couple months, but I knew immediately it was not going to work for me. So at this point, I did not know what to do. I was adamant about being sober, but I wasn't strong enough to do it. I had plenty of relapses during that point. If any of my family are listening right now, I'm sorry, but you know that I wasn't exactly in the best frame of mind back then. Eventually, the decision was that I was to move out to Edmonton for a little while. I supported this decision. It was really hard on me. I had a girlfriend at the time who eventually we ended up splitting ways. We still talk to this day. But I had a girlfriend at the time, and it was very hard for me to leave. But I knew being in Amherstburg, Windsor area that I could find drugs whenever I needed to. So ultimately, I decided that it was a good idea to go. I had a older influence that came with me when I went to Edmonton. I do not want to, like I said off the top, I do not want to put anybody on blast. So I will not name any names or mention what their affiliation to me was. But there was somebody that came with me. And we were both trying to start a new life, trying to get better. And we both left behind people that we loved. And we packed up every dollar we had and we moved out to Edmonton. Bad fucking idea. I immediately fell into old habits again. When I was in Edmonton for the first few months, I had smoked crack probably 3 or 4 times, and I was immediately doing prescription drugs. I'm not going to get into specifics about what happened, but the older influence that came out with me ended up having to leave. I was devastated. At this point, that influence was somebody who I highly looked up to and I loved dearly. So I was devastated when they had to leave. It ended up being the absolute best thing that has ever happened to me. I haven't seen that person since. I don't plan on seeing that person unless there is proof of some sort of years of sobriety, but that is few and far and hard to do. So I do not plan on seeing that person ever again. That person leaving me in Edmonton was the best thing that ever happened to me. After that, I had a couple more relapses, nothing too terrible. I managed to crawl my way back out, and I decided at that point that I was fucking done. I was done. That was it. I was fucking done. Problem was, I didn't know what the fuck to do. How does somebody who can't really, I shouldn't say can't, who doesn't really want to live through his entire life sober? I never really had an issue with booze. I've smoked cannabis basically my whole life, and I will admit that as a teenager, I did abuse cannabis. I smoked it when I was supposed to be at school, that sort of thing, and I fucked myself being an idiot like that. But as I got older, I was able to mitigate my use, and I got to a point where I was using cannabis responsibly. But I had decided that when I was an addict, that I had to quit everything, because that was basically the only option, is what every addiction counseling that I had seen at that point, at least, had said, was that you need to live life completely sober. And it was something that I was led to believe for a very long time. I was wrong. And once again, I want to state that this is not something, I am not an expert by any means. So this is just my story and how I did things. I am not a doctor. I am not an addiction specialist. I can only tell you my story and what happened to me. I realized that I couldn't necessarily do life completely sober. And at this point, I had already ruined my guts with drug use from years and years of ecstasy and crack cocaine and not eating. So booze was out of the question. I'd have a few beers and I'd just feel sick. I couldn't even get to the point really where I would get a buzz because I'd just feel sick. And if I did, I went way too hard. And I would drink, a 40-ouncer of vodka and half a case of beer. And that was not the option for me. I decided to try cannabis back out again. And I believe it was my best decision that I've ever done. I was able to mitigate, because when I was an addict, I was fine when everything was okay. When the day was going good, nothing was going bad, I was okay. I'd go, I could take a walk, I could have a cigarette, everything was okay. The moment something went bad, I would become weak. And there were times where the moment something would become bad, I'd be finding myself on the phone looking for crack. And I would catch myself and be like, whoa, what the fuck? And I'd throw my phone away. But then as the day got worse, eventually I'd be finding some sort of drug, whatever it is, to mitigate the terrible feelings I felt about myself. So I decided to give cannabis a try again, and I started smoking again. I started smoking very slowly. Cannabis in the BC area is powerful, and I learned real quickly it was nothing like what I was used to down here. So I smoked very little. And, once or twice a day, just whenever I was feeling terrible or I was getting down on myself, I would sit down, I'd roll a little joint up, and I'd smoke it. And it worked. I have not had a relapse since shortly after I came home from Edmonton. I had one relapse when I came home from Edmonton. It's currently one of my biggest regrets because it was dumb and there was no need for it. But it was just something that kind of happened and I let happen, and I feel stupid for it to this day. I haven't touched anything since. It's been close to 10 years now. And I have spent a lot of time learning about cannabis, figuring out what it is about it that was able to help me. I currently have a medical cannabis prescription for Crohn's disease and arthritis. Now, that's just kind of serendipitous as I was already smoking cannabis anyways, and I was using it to mitigate my own symptoms because I already knew I couldn't eat, I couldn't walk around. I was having a lot of trouble doing things. So it's just serendipitous that I got my card and it worked out well for me. That being said, I know there's a lot of people out there that are suffering right now, whether it be pain or any sort of chronic illness that is not readily available or visible to the people out in front of you, or if you're a suffering addict or somebody suffering through watching an addict. I want you to know that there are lots of options for helping yourselves, not only the person that needs recovery, but yourself. I'm going to give you a couple associations here for people that need help. If anybody listening to this is thinking about getting help for themselves or somebody that they know, please, please, please consider some of these options. Off the top, I'm going to just send you straight Alcoholics Anonymous. They're a great organization with a lot of people that are just like you, that have been addicts, that have used this program, that understand that relapse is a thing that happens. If this is something that you or somebody you know you feel they need, then they should definitely be somebody you contact. I'm going to give the Windsor number right now, and that is 519-256-9975. And there's lots of different organizations in different cities. A quick Google search will give you any other numbers you absolutely would need. The next option we have is one I mentioned earlier as well, Brentwood Recovery Home. They're located at 2335 Dougal Ave, Windsor, Ontario. They are a great program. They also take in like men, women, ages 16 of older, and you can live there and they will work with you. It's a very great program. I would also like to mention too, I don't have the exact data about it right now, but Al-Anon for families. If you are dealing with somebody who's an alcoholic and you feel like you can't deal with it anymore without some sort of outside help, there's lots of options for getting outside help. Outside of that, if you give a quick Google search, there's literally hundreds and hundreds of different addiction assessments and referral programs and all sorts of stuff that you can do to get the person, yourself or the person that you love, help. I'm going to name one more just specifically because it was one that I used, Narcotics Anonymous. If you want to get some information about them, they are 1-800-811-3887. So ladies and gentlemen, this has been my story. I know it was a little deep and dark and shitty for a little while there, and I apologize for that. And like I said before, we are going to try and keep most things lighthearted and happy, and I want you guys to laugh and maybe learn a few things. Over the next coming days, we're going to be recording more episodes. I hope to have a first official episode out for 420, but do not hold me to that. You never know. I'm basically, like I said off the top, a moron. So this could all fall apart and I might not have something out for a month after that. But I will have something more for you people to listen to. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Until next time, be kind to each other.